Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Sherlock Holmes, The Adventure of the Blue Carbuncle. Chapter 1. The Lost Hat and the Geese. 2 days after Christmas, I was coming back to my place in Baker Street, where I lived with Sherlock Holmes. The snow was falling hard as I walked to number 221B. The snow on the ground made it hard to hear the horses' feet. The carriages went slow so they wouldn't slip. The street was quiet. Most people had stopped to rest after the busy Christmas time. Holmes and I hadn't been roommates for long, but I had helped him with some cases. I liked helping him, and I wondered if he was working on any new cases as I walked in the snow. I knew he had probably been alone on Christmas, but he didn't mind. Our housekeeper, Mrs. Hudson, took good care of him. When I got home, Mrs. Hudson greeted me.
"Merry Christmas, Dr. Watson,"
she said, smiling big. I thought she might kiss my cheek. I would have been okay with it, but I thought about how funny Holmes would find it.
"Mr. Holmes will be glad to see you. He needs company,"
she said. I took off my coat and hat and shook off the snow. "It's cold out, Mrs. Hudson. I hope you're staying in." She smiled and said,
"I'll make you some hot coffee."
I was excited and ran up the stairs, hoping for a new mystery. I found Holmes in his nightshirt, looking at a worn-out hat. He looked different, with his hair messy and his face lit by the fire. He was looking at the hat with a magnifying glass. It meant one thing. "Is there a crime?" I asked. "Is there a dangerous story with this regular hat?" Holmes smiled slowly and didn't look surprised to see me, even though I was early.
"No, Watson, but it's still an interesting mystery. Come in. I'm happy to have a friend to share it with."
"Please, tell me about this hat, Holmes," I said, sitting across from him and warming my hands by the fire. "Even though it looks normal, is it a clue to help you solve a mystery?"
"Oh, there's no crime here."
"Then why look at it so much?" I asked. Holmes looked at me.
With so many people living close together, strange things happen. But they're not always crimes. And this is likely the same,"
he said.
"It's just an interesting problem."
I felt let down. Holmes began to explain.
"The hat came on Christmas Eve with a goose.
The goose was wearing it? I joked. He ignored my joke. Holmes continued.
The doorman of the hotel across the street, Peterson, brought it here on Christmas morning."
I knew Peterson. Holmes told me that Peterson saw a tall man with a goose attacked by some rough men. The tall man broke a window by accident. Everyone ran away, leaving the goose and hat. Peterson brought them to Holmes since there was no real crime. "Where's the goose?" I asked.
"It's being cooked for Peterson's family,"
Holmes answered. "Why didn't he give them back?" I asked. Holmes explained that the only clue was a label that said Mrs. Henry Baker and the initials HB in the hat. With so many Henry Bakers in London, Peterson brought them to Holmes to solve the mystery. Holmes pointed to his magnifying glass.
"Look at the hat, Watson. Tell me about the owner."
Holmes was good at finding facts from small clues. I thought about how I did this with my patients, but this was different. I picked up the hat and looked at it. It was an old hat with faded lining and the initials HB. It had some broken elastic and was dusty. There were stains covered with ink. "I see nothing," I said.
"No, Watson, you see everything. You just don't think about what you see."
I sighed. "Then tell me what you know."
Are you enjoying this story? Let us know by tapping the like button. Thank you.
Chapter 2. The Discovery of the Blue Carbuncle. Holmes held up the hat, looking at it carefully.
"This hat was costly and stylish 3 years ago,"
He started.
Look at the silk inside. Since Mr. Baker hasn't bought a new one, I think he has money problems. He may be clever but perhaps drinks or gambles. He put an elastic in the hat to keep it, but didn't fix it when it broke. I also believe his wife doesn't love him anymore, and he doesn't have gas lighting at home.
I laughed. Holmes, you're joking. How can you know such things from a hat? Holmes smiled a little.
The size of the hat shows he's intellectual.
He said, putting it on. It was too big, and I smiled at how funny he looked.
A big head must have something inside.
Holmes said, smirking. Mrs. Hudson brought coffee and seemed amused but said nothing. How can you know his wife doesn't love him? I asked. Holmes took off the hat.
The label said Mrs. Henry Baker. What wife lets her husband wear a dirty hat? The dust shows he stays home often. The sweat stains show he's unfit. He's middle-aged, recently had a haircut, and uses lime hair wax.
And no gas lighting?
The marks are candle stains. 1 or 2 could be an accident, but 5 shows he's often near candles.
Holmes explained. I see, I said, understanding. But no crime has happened. Isn't this a waste of time? Holmes started to reply, but the door flew open, and Peterson rushed in, red-faced.
The goose, Mr. Holmes. The goose?
He cried.
What about it? Did it come back to life?
Holmes joked. Peterson held out his hand.
See here what my wife found in its throat.
I looked closer as he opened his hand. Holmes leaned forward.
You know what this is, Peterson?
A diamond. A valuable gem, sir.
I recalled a newspaper article I'd read a few days before. The blue carbuncle, I exclaimed. Stolen from the Countess of Morcar's room at the Cosmopolitan Hotel.
Exactly,
said Holmes, his eyes shining. He showed Peterson the newspaper article. Hotel Cosmopolitan jewelry theft. John Horner, a plumber, was arrested for stealing the blue carbuncle from the Countess of Morcar. James Ryder, a hotel worker, said he'd left Horner alone in the room. When he returned, the jewel was gone. Horner was arrested, but the stone wasn't found. A reward of £1,000 has been offered for its return.
£1,000 reward,
Peterson said, astonished.
a huge amount indeed.
Holmes replied.
The Countess treasures it greatly. She paid much to have it back.
But why was the blue carbuncle in a goose's throat? I asked.
Our small discoveries have become quite important.
Holmes said, standing.
We must find how the gem got from the hotel to the goose. Our next clue is Mr. Henry Baker, the hat's owner. We must trace the stone back to the thief.
He quickly wrote a note for Peterson to publish.
And buy a goose to replace the one you're going to eat tonight.
The advertisement read, found at Goodge Street, a goose and black felt hat. Mr. Henry Baker can get them back at 221B Baker Street. Do you think Mr. Baker will see it? I asked.
He's not rich. He'll notice the loss.
Holmes replied. After Peterson left, Holmes admired the stone.
It's beautiful,
He said.
I'll keep it safe and inform the Countess.
I looked for an article about the stone in Holmes' scrapbook. The blue carbuncle was found in China in 1874. It was blue, not red, and had a history of violence. Do you think Horner is innocent? I asked.
I can't say.
Said Holmes.
And about Henry Baker, I'll wait for more information. We'll see if our advertisement works. We eat at 7,
He added, laughing.
and since it's chicken tonight, I'll have Mrs. Hudson check its throat.
Holmes was happy today.
You see, Watson, the stone got into the goose, and the goose was with Mr. Baker, the hat's owner. The clues are more interesting now. We must see if Mr. Baker is innocent.
I agreed and looked forward to meeting Mr. Baker. But I had patience to visit, so I left Holmes to think about the case himself.
Don't miss a single chapter of our extraordinary stories. Hit the subscribe button now.
Chapter 3. The Hunt for the Goose's Owner. At 6:30 in the evening, I arrived back at Baker Street. There was a tall man at our door. He wore a long coat and a Scottish beret. His hat looked odd with his smart clothes. If this was Mr. Henry Baker, I understood why he wore such a hat. He didn't have another one. The man looked exactly as Holmes had described. As we went into Holmes' room, Holmes greeted him warmly.
Mr. Henry Baker, please sit by the fire. Let me introduce Dr. Watson.
Mr. Baker nodded at me and sat down. Holmes pointed to the hat.
Is this your hat?
The man, large and smart-looking, looked at it.
Yes, sir. It's my hat.
We thought you'd look for it in the newspapers, lost and found,
said Holmes. Baker laughed, looking a bit embarrassed.
I didn't have much money. I thought the people who attacked me had taken the goose and hat. Advertising seemed a waste.
Holmes explained we had eaten the goose, but there was a fresh one for him. Mr. Baker was relieved.
but we still have the feathers, legs, and fur to the other bird if you want them.
Holmes said. Baker laughed.
No use for them, sir. Thank you for the new goose.
Holmes and I realized Mr. Baker didn't know about the theft. Before leaving, Mr. Baker told us he bought the goose from the Alpha Inn near the British Museum, where he worked. He thanked us and left, trying to look serious.
Mr. Henry Baker knows nothing about the robbery,
said Holmes.
Let's follow this clue quickly.
I was glad I wasn't too hungry. Holmes often forgot to eat when he was working on a mystery. It was a very cold night, so we dressed warmly. After a quick walk, we reached the Alpha Inn in Bloomsbury. The inn was busy, even though the streets were empty.
2 lemonades, please.
Holmes asked the barman, who smiled and filled our glasses.
Your lemonade should be as good as your geese.
Holmes thanked him.
My geese?
The landlord asked, confused.
I spoke to Mr. Henry Baker. He got a goose from your goose club.
Holmes explained. The landlord understood but said,
They're not my geese. I got them from a man in Covent Garden Market.
Who?
Asked Holmes.
Breckenridge.
He replied. To your health, landlord, we said, and then left quickly. I was sad to leave my lemonade behind. Outside, Holmes said,
We must hurry, Watson.
A man could go to prison for theft. John Horner may be innocent. We must follow our clue and see that justice is done. Holmes and I walked through the narrow streets to Covent Garden Market. We quickly found a large stall with the name Breckenridge on it. The man at the counter was busy and didn't notice us.
Good evening. Cold night,
said Holmes, shivering for effect. The man grumbled and kept working.
You've sold all your geese?
Holmes asked.
I'll have more tomorrow.
The man replied.
But I wanted geese from you. The Alpha Inn's landlord recommended you.
Holmes continued.
What about it?
The man snapped, looking angry. Holmes tried to ask about the geese's origin, but the man refused to answer, frustrated by many similar questions that day. Holmes decided to make a bet, pretending to be sure that the geese were country bred.
It was not.
The man protested.
I say it is.
Holmes insisted. Finally, the man showed Holmes his books, where they found the name and address of Mrs. Oakshott, who sold the geese to the Alpha Inn. Holmes lost the bet and left, pretending to be upset. But he was pleased and laughed to himself.
That man was stubborn,
he said to me.
But now we're close to solving the mystery. Should we visit Mrs. Oakshott tonight or tomorrow?
Suddenly, we saw an argument at the stall. A small, rat-faced man was arguing with Breckenridge about a goose.
One of them was mine,
the man whined.
asked Mrs. Oakshott.
Breckenridge shouted, threatening to set his dog on him. Holmes caught up with the man, offering to help. The man was suspicious, but Holmes explained he knew about the geese. The man's suspicion melted away.
Oh, sir, you're just who I wanted to meet.
He exclaimed. We took a carriage, and Holmes asked his name.
My name is John Robinson.
Your real name?
Said Holmes gently.
My name is James Ryder.
He admitted.
Attendant at the Hotel Cosmopolitan?
Holmes added. Ryder looked scared and hopeful. We continued to Baker Street, with Ryder's nervous hands a constant reminder of the mystery we were yet to unravel. Chapter 4. Confession and Resolution. We walked into the sitting room, and Holmes happily said,
Come sit by the fire, Mr. Ryder. You look cold.
Mrs. Hudson, our landlady, had made sure the room was cozy. She always looked after us, especially Holmes. I sat down at the table, and Holmes took off his shoes, put on his slippers, and sat facing Mr. Ryder.
Mr. Ryder, you ought to know about the geese, right?
He asked.
Yes, sir.
Or rather, one special goose.
A white one with a black mark on its tail, Holmes said. Ryder seemed very excited.
Oh, sir, can you tell me where it went?
It came here.
Holmes said.
A remarkable bird. It laid a blue egg after it died. Here it is.
Ryder looked like he was going to fall. I almost got up to help him. Holmes took out the blue carbuncle, a beautiful gem, from his box.
The game's up, Ryder,
said Holmes softly.
You better sit down.
He told me to help Ryder and get him some water.
He's a weak fellow,
he said. After Ryder had some water, he looked a bit better. Holmes told him.
I know almost everything now, but let's clear up all the details. How did you learn about this blue gem?
Catherine Cusack told me.
Ryder said, almost whispering.
The Countess's maid. You were tempted by easy money.
You set up the plumber Horner, to be blamed, stole the jewel, and ran away. Poor Horner got arrested for something he didn't do, Holmes said, getting angrier. Ryder suddenly fell to the floor, crying.
Have mercy. Think of my family. I'll never do wrong again. Please don't tell the police.
Sit back down.
Holmes ordered.
You beg now, but you let an innocent man go to jail.
I had never seen Holmes so angry, but Ryder deserved it.
I'll leave the country, and the case against Horner will go away.
Ryder promised.
But first, tell us everything,
said Holmes, calming down.
How did the gem get inside the goose? How did the goose end up at the market? Tell us the truth. It's your only chance.
I was ready to hear Ryder's story. With nervous eyes, he looked at Holmes and me.
I'll tell you everything,
he said.
After Horner was arrested, I had to hide the gem.
I couldn't keep it in the hotel, so I pretended to run an errand and went to my sister's house in Brixton. She sells geese. I was scared the police would catch me all the way. He seemed to relive the fear.
I was sweating when I got there. My sister said I looked sick, so I told her about the robbery. I went to her yard to think and saw her geese. They calmed me, and I thought of Maudsley, who could sell the gem.
He smiled, thinking about his clever plan.
I needed to get the gem to Kilburn. Looking at the geese, I had an idea. My sister was getting me a goose for Christmas, so I chose one with a black bar on its tail and put the gem inside it. But it escaped, and my sister saw me.
What are you doing with that bird, Jem?
She asked. You promised me a goose for Christmas, and I've chosen this one, I said.
But I saved a bigger one for you,
she said, disappointed. I'd rather have this one, I told her. She shrugged.
Kill it and take it with you.
I took it to Kilburn, but when we opened it, the stone was gone. I made a mistake. I rushed back, but the geese were sold to Covent Garden Market. and there was another one with a black bar on its tail.
He started crying, his face in his hands. Holmes tapped the table, then suddenly stood up and opened the door.
What, sir?
Ryder looked shocked.
Get out.
Holmes yelled. Ryder ran out, and Holmes reached for his pipe.
I'm not here to solve police crimes,
He said.
Since no one's in danger, and Ryder won't testify against Horner, the case will fall apart. I might be saving Ryder. He won't do it again, but prison could ruin him. It's a time for forgiving.
I saw his point. Ryder was weak, and jail could harm him.
Please ring the bell, Watson. Let's start another investigation involving a bird,
He said, smiling. I smiled too, feeling hungry for dinner and glad Holmes was finally thinking about food. And I was glad it wasn't going to be a goose. The end. Have you enjoyed this story? Like and subscribe to our channel now to unlock fresh tales and level up your English skills.